priest will give you this round cracker, and he will say, "The body of Christ," and then you eat it.
Jesus was made of crackers?
No.
But crackers are his body.
Yes.
What?
Oh yeah, bust out your Bibles, boys and girls, because it's time to talk about religion. Now, I think it goes without saying that South Park is an offensive show. They kind of make fun of everything. So naturally, when it comes to a topic as sacred as religion, they've said some pretty controversial stuff. Like, I think it's pretty fair to say that there is no group or faith of people that is safe from their ridicule. They'll mock them, criticize them, invalidate their existence. And while that's obviously caused the show a lot of backlash over the years, it's also made for some of the funniest episodes. Which is why I'm doing this video, because I really just wanted an excuse to laugh at funny South Park jokes and get paid to do it. But of course, because this is South Park, their take on religion isn't just funny, it can actually be pretty deep sometimes. And so for that reason, I think it'd be pretty cool if we took a closer look at how they handle each religion on the show and get an idea of what they're really saying. Now, in order to cover this subject, I'm gonna have to discuss some of the show's banned episodes. And as we all know, those aren't available on streaming platforms today, which meant that I had to do some snooping around online to prepare this video for you. And whenever I'm exploring the depths of the internet, I use Surfshark VPN to make sure that I'm protecting my data. Yeah, that's right, guys, your boy's got a sponsorship. Be proud. But seriously, I don't mess around when it comes to safety online, especially if I'm on my laptop on public Wi-Fi. Because I mean, data interception, identity theft, those things are no joke. And I'm not trying to leak my secret Sheila Broflovsky fan art, okay? The world isn't ready for that. Yet. But with Surfshark VPN, you get unlimited devices covered with over 3,200 servers in 100 different countries, which is important for me, because I have a lot of Sheila fan art. It's taking up most of my devices. Plus, I get access to geo-restricted content like HBO Max, which we don't have in Canada, and they have more episodes of South Park than Paramount does. So yeah, if you're into protecting yourself online like I am, then you can get an extra 4 months of Surfshark VPN for free by using code SLUSH at checkout or going to the link in the description below. And that's like an extra third of a year right there, so you're gonna want to claim those extra 4 months. And if you're worried that you might not like it, then don't, because Surfshark is offering a risk-free 30-day guarantee. So if you change your mind in those 30 days, you can get your money back. But yeah, thanks to the protection of my VPN, I was able to get those episodes I needed to prepare for this video, which means that we're ready to dive into this bad boy, starting with South Park's take on one of the biggest religions in the world, Christianity. When it comes to describing a show like South Park, people tend to lean on certain descriptions. It's raunchy, it's edgy, it's political satire, it ruined a generation of young people by giving them the ridiculous notion that everyone is stupid, which is totally not true at all. But you know what people never say? That South Park is a Christian show. And the reason for that is because it's not. I mean, this isn't some Talking Vegetables movie or a Switchfoot song, but South Park is definitely a show that relies heavily on seeing things through a Christian lens. It focuses on a mostly Christian world, it frequently explores the Christian experience in America, and it comments on Christianity more than any other religion. Now, because of all that, a lot of the show's main characters are also Christian. 3 out of the 4 boys, the Marshes, the Stotches, nearly every significant side character, and sure, they're not religiously Christian, but that's because most of the town is pretty secular, even when it comes to how they act at church.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Broncos.
Broncos.
Let's go, Broncos.
Broncos. Let's go.
But still, Christianity definitely has its place in South Park, especially considering that the town's most famous resident is none other than Jesus Christ himself. Yeah, can't do a video about South Park versus religion without mentioning the fact that the Son of God is their literal neighbor. Or, you know, that Satan is also kind of a major character. Now, the interesting thing about this is that for a show like South Park, they don't exactly use these characters in the way you might expect them to. And what I mean by that is, even though they're directly from the Bible itself, they rarely ever use Jesus or Satan to comment on Christianity. Which is not to say that they don't make jokes at their expense, because they do, but it's just that those jokes tend to focus on the more human elements of their characters rather than the religious stuff. Like take Jesus, for example. When he's the butt of the joke, it's usually about how he struggles to adapt to modern times, or his lackluster talk show Jesus and Pals, or how poorly his old miracles have aged by today's standards.
Behold, I have here 5 loaves of bread and 3 fish. Certainly not enough to feed this entire crowd, but now, turn around. Okay, now turn back.
Now, how the hell did he do that?
But yeah, this doesn't just apply to the jokes they make about Jesus, because even the episodes that focus on him don't make that focus about religion. Instead, it's almost always your typical South Park takeaway that has more to do with general guidance and common sense. And like, yeah, sure, that is technically pretty in line with how biblically canon Jesus would act, you know, as opposed to that awful fandom Jesus that seems to make idiots hate gay people and stuff. But I think what makes the approach to the character so unique is that they don't go for the whole biblical religious thing with him. Instead, they make him human, rational. It's why Jesus and Satan are actually very relatable characters in the show. Because in South Park, even Jesus finds it difficult to be Jesus-like. He's flawed. He's susceptible to compromising on his own values. He'll get stuck in the pursuit of better ratings and lose sight of why he's doing his talk show. Or he'll worry too much about pleasing people at the turn of the millennium so that he can make his big comeback. He gets mad sometimes and kills people with guns. And he even made himself look like a total fraud when he wanted to improve his brand.
And I think we have everything just about worked out. You know, whatever stupid rumors people want to believe about me, it doesn't change the fact that the people of Belarus need my help.
I believe it's Belarus, Jesus.
Yes, it very well may be if we don't do something now.
The same thing applies to Satan. He's supposed to be the Prince of Darkness, but he's hardly ever depicted as evil. In fact, in a lot of instances, he seems to be a pretty nice guy. He throws hula parties for people in hell, Christmas parties for a sad Hitler. He'll take time out of his day to teach Stan about addiction. He dates nice guys like Chris. And even when he was in a relationship with Saddam, it was clear that Satan was the victim of abuse, not the other way around. Which, you know, might be kind of surprising for some, considering that he's the literal devil. Now, that's not to say that he's perfect by any means. He's definitely got a massive ego and acts like a giant vagina in the Super Sweet 16 episode. But again, this all makes him seem very human, especially considering that he's often consumed with very pedestrian issues like his image or his love life.
Now it's like there's one guy who's horrible to me, but I'm totally sexually attracted to, and then one guy who's really nice to me, but I'm not sexually attracted to at all.
Wow, that really sucks.
There's probably an argument to make here about how South Park's depiction of Satan humanizes sin, but I don't know, don't quote me on that. That's getting a little too deep for this YouTube video about South Park, and I'm not trying to be a philosopher, okay? I'm just trying to be Turkey Tom Rich. Anyways, with the way that Jesus and Satan tend to learn something at the end of their episodes, much like Kyle and Stan do, they're basically using these characters to cover more spiritual topics, like self-actualization stuff, which is pretty damn wholesome considering that South Park is a show that likes to rip stuff apart. But honestly, if you look closely at the show, you'll find that it barely ever criticizes religion directly, at least not in terms of what's in the Bible. Like, I can only think of one example where South Park does that, and it comes from the episode Cartman Land when Gerald reads the book of Job to Kyle, which is this story where God intentionally makes one of his devout followers suffer in order to test his faith.
Why would God do such horrible things to a good person just to prove a point to Satan?
Oh, I don't know.
Then I was right. Job has all his children killed, and Michael Bay gets to keep making movies. There isn't a God.
Godlike episode. Definitely got to cover that soon. Anyways, while that might be one of the only times that South Park directly criticizes the Bible, that doesn't mean they don't absolutely tear Christianity into pieces all the time. Because they do, but it's just always through the things that surround the religion, like, for example, its followers. Christians in South Park are often portrayed as stupid, irrational, lost and confused, easily manipulated. They'll do things like march through the streets chanting Nazi slogans because they were really moved by the passion. They'll replace their beliefs with random social movements because it turns out Jesus was on drugs when he performed his miracles. They'll line up to be healed by a statue of Mary because it was bleeding from its ass, which I'll admit is kind of miraculous. But then they'll just as quickly stop believing in the statue's power because it turns out that it wasn't coming from her ass, which means that, quote,
"A chick bleeding out her vagina is no miracle. Chicks bleed out their vaginas all the time."
See, that one makes them stupid and sexist. Now, obviously, their criticism goes beyond just those examples. It also touches on subjects like homophobia or how terrible Christian rock music is. Because, you know, they show how millions of Christians will happily buy an album that's literally full of songs about wanting to have sex with Jesus.
I wanna get down on my knees and start pleasing Jesus. I wanna feel his salvation all over my face.
But in my opinion, these issues are covered in a much more scathing manner when the show focuses on its main target, the institutions of Christianity. This is where they really like to show the worst side of the religion. Now, South Park tends to cover this from a few different angles. Sometimes it's a more obvious criticism, like how the church does things to coerce their followers into giving them money. You know, like the Christian Broadcasting Channel asking for more donations to get that fancy new space cruiser with an argon laser. Or how the church uses tools like hell to scare their followers into taking the religion more seriously, getting them to put more money in the collection plate.
It worked, you guys. It actually worked. What worked? Everybody bought the whole act. They keep giving and giving until we have it all.
I know that was technically Cartman, but he learned it from Father Maxi, so I think it still stands. Now, to be fair, those criticisms are pretty standard. Nothing that a million people haven't said about the vast majority of religions. But where things tend to get a little more spicy is when South Park starts talking about how the church forces their beliefs onto others. For example, we see this in the Bloody Mary episode through Alcoholics Anonymous, where they show how the group takes advantage of people who've hit a low point in their lives to get them to embrace their ideas about God. We see it in the Starvin' Marvin episodes, with how missionaries around the world will do everything they can to convert people who live in third world countries and don't want to be Christian. And obviously this applies even more to the planet Marklar, who don't care about our Marklar and all the Marklar it would supposedly bring. But in my opinion, the worst of all is what they show in the Bi-Curious episode. Specifically how conversion camps across America are literally driving kids to their own deaths by teaching them that they were born wrong and should feel guilty for who they are.
Right now, you're like a paperclip. And just like a paperclip, God needs to bend you and shape you and make you straight.
Probably one of the edgiest episodes that the show has ever done, but also a brilliant critique of the very real portion of the Christian population that still believes in this kind of thing today. But of course, we can't talk about South Park's commentary on Christian institutions without talking about the Vatican. You can tell that they have absolutely no respect for the Vatican because they shit on it harder than pretty much everything else that relates to Christianity. They depict the Pope as old and senile, literally pooping his pants like he's Rod Stewart.
The priest here said that people with mental handicaps might end up in hell. Is that true?
All of the priests are self-admitting pedos and don't even see it as a problem, and the Catholic Church actively goes out of their way to defend them and hide the evidence. Which is not even a joke, by the way. The Catholic Church really does have a long history of sexually abusing young boys. I mean, South Park obviously exaggerates it, but it's a real thing. And what's interesting is that for this topic, South Park actually does relate it to the religion itself, but they make it more about a failure to adapt to modern times than a criticism of the Bible. Because from their perspective, it's a byproduct of the rules around priesthood and not being able to have sex, which turns into this whole critique around being too rigid with Christianity in general. They show how holding on to traditions has led the church to stick by weird, arbitrary rules that don't even make sense anymore, like worshiping a spider queen or catering to the Galgamex and their razor-sharp vaginas, which is not even a joke, by the way. The Catholic Church really does have a long history of catering to the Galgamex. Now, given their hatred for this particular institution, I think it should come as no surprise that in this show, the people at the top of the Vatican are often depicted as the most power-hungry and murderous. They'll attack anyone they can for power, boil innocent people alive, and take anyone they can prisoner, even if it's Jesus.
Kill him. What? He goes against the church. He must die. All right, that does it, Bill. I'm pretty sure that killing Jesus is not very Christian. You are soft, weak. You leave me no choice. Take them!
And look, I'm no big city lawyer, but to me, the real critique here seems to be about how religion and power structures don't mix, because they just end up creating self-serving gatekeepers that breed corruption into their institutions, all while preventing any kind of positive change that might threaten the people with that power. And yeah, that technically applies to all religions, but in the case of how South Park portrays the Catholic Church, this means refusing to change with the times and silencing any form of dissent, which means that their version of the church cares more about itself than morality or God. I don't know about you, but I kind of buy that actually. So obviously this naturally leads to people becoming disillusioned with the church and either losing their respect for it or leaving it altogether. We see this in the episode A Boy and His Priest, where everyone mocks Father Maxi during his sermons.
He gave to us his only son.
And a Catholic priest raped him.
And we also see this in the episode Red Hot Catholic Love, where the people of South Park decide to become atheists because they no longer see the value in keeping with the religion.
Yeah, let's kill God, yeah!
Well, let's just be atheists.
Same thing.
Yeah!
But it's important to keep in mind that none of this means that South Park hates Christianity. In fact, that's not the case at all. Trey Parker is Christian, and the show actually has a deep respect for the spiritual benefits of the religion. After all, Red Hot Catholic Love ends with them realizing the value in Catholicism, and they even use characters from the Bible as a way of humanizing the mythos. It's just that those things aren't what people remember, because what people really remember is Jesus Christ killing a guy with a crazy ninja star. I know, you don't have to say it. Technically, atheism is not a religion, it's more of a philosophy. Even though being 100% sure that there is no God is like almost the same as being 100% sure that there is a God. But whatever, man, we could just ignore that for now. But yeah, since South Park has dedicated like 3 episodes to the topic, and it more or less fits in line with the rest of this video, I figured why not talk about atheism anyways. Besides, Go God Go is like one of my all-time favorite 2-parters, so you know I couldn't resist it. You know I had to talk about those cute otters and their useful little tummies.
Know this time, child. I shall smash your skull like a clam on my tummy.
Now, to put it bluntly, South Park is not kind to atheists, which I know can be kind of surprising at first, mostly because the show has a long history of making fun of organized religion, as we've now covered. And I think that's led a lot of people to assume that Trey Parker and Matt Stone themselves were atheists, you know, because they like rational thinking so much. So surely they too were a bunch of science-loving God haters. But yeah, in reality, that's not the case at all. Those guys actually really value religion, and when the two of them realized that people were putting them in that atheist box, they felt compelled to set the record straight. They read books from Dawkins and Sam Harris and eventually concluded that atheists are just basically, well, you know what, let me just play the clip for you.
Even if you can read parts of like Richard Dawkins' book or Sam Harris's book and agree with them, you're just like, the tone of it is so bitchy and whiny that you just are like, ugh. Like,
you know, it's like there's also like the kids when you're in like 1st grade, and then there's that one 1st grader going around telling all the kindergartners, there's no Santa Claus, you know, stupid. How do you think Santa Claus could go around the world and get in everyone's chimney in one night? Does that make any sense? And you're like, dude, chill out.
We know.
We're having fun believing in Santa Claus. Relax.
I think my favorite part about the lore of the atheist episode in South Park is that Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller sent them an email about how heartbroken he was when he found out that they believe in God, which is just like kind of hilarious to me that he cared that much. But anyways, as you might imagine, atheists in South Park are not portrayed as these super grounded intellectuals, but instead as annoying and up their own asses. In the show, atheists tend to have a very high and mighty attitude because they think they're better than the people who believe in religion, all while being almost identical in behavior. One of the funniest examples of this for me is actually from the season 15 episode, The Poor Kid, where Kenny and his siblings get sent to a foster home that treats agnosticism exactly like how a religious Christian household would treat God.
These are your foster brothers and sisters. They are all strict agnostics. David, do you believe in God?
I don't know.
Right.
Like, you'd think that a philosophy where you're admitting to not knowing the truth would be treated a little more gently, but no, South Park craps on that too, which I find very funny. But yeah, when it comes to atheism in South Park, their approach is a lot like Christianity, which is to say that the critique isn't really with the philosophy itself. They don't make fun of the skepticism around God or the rational scientific approach. In fact, I'd even argue that South Park typically operates within that rational approach for almost all of the topics that it covers. But instead, the show likes to make fun of the followers or leaders of atheism. People like Dawkins, who come off as elitist, or Miss Garrison, who flip-flops on her beliefs a bunch. They'll poke fun at the entitlement that comes with being atheist in a country that's founded on Christianity. Like the people of South Park in Red Hot Catholic Love, who turn atheist only to immediately start demanding that the world around them cater to their views.
If I'm gonna raise my son to be atheist, I don't want him saying under God every day at school. That could really damage him. Under God should be taken out of the, excuse me.
But of course, that's not what you want me to talk about. That's not the atheist episode that gets your mouth watering and your giny tingling, because you want me to get to the atheist episode, their most famous critique on the subject that takes place in a weird alternate future. A future where atheists across the globe are at war with each other because they can't pick a good name.
Unified Atheist League is the most logical name.
United Atheist Alliance makes more sense.
No! Allied Atheist Alliance! That way it has 3 A's! That is the logical choice!
Now obviously, atheism doesn't have organized institutions in the same way that religions do, but in order for South Park to make their point, which relies on drawing parallels between atheism and religion, they imagine a future where it does. They have Dawkins as their messiah figure, factions disagreeing over arbitrary nonsense, and they say things like, "Oh my science." Now to me, this alternate future is their way of showing that even a philosophy like atheism can go wrong. It doesn't matter if it's rooted in something scientific or that it has no religious or metaphysical components to it, because at the end of the day, it can still fall into stupid dogmatic conflicts anyways. Now the beautiful thing about this episode is that the issue these future atheists are facing has nothing to do with their actual beliefs. They pretty much all agree on the same stuff about science and God, but they've come into this extremely stupid conflict about what to name themselves because each group believes that they've chosen the perfect atheist name and are way too stubborn to have an open mind about it. In fact, they're so stubborn that anyone who tries to have an open mind is immediately murdered.
Maybe just believing in God makes God exist. Kill the wise one! Kill the wise one! What? Oh, wait!
Now to me, this fits perfectly with South Park's views on Christianity. It's not the religion that's the problem, it's the people, the followers. They're the ones who make things so rigid and stuck. They're the ones who cause suffering in the name of their beliefs. And that's just a mistake that gets repeated over and over again, whether the guiding philosophy is religious or scientific. Because they're saying that this is a human problem, not a philosophy thing. We would still be fighting the same wars even if they weren't in the name of God, because the real cause is our own rigidity. That's why you don't really see the show trying to contend with atheist beliefs or try to disprove the philosophy in any way, because that's not really what South Park does. In reality, they only usually challenge things on a societal level. That's why their eventual conclusion in the atheist episode is to simply get rid of all the isms, because once you get rid of the dogma and allow yourself to be open-minded and stop being a dick, then everyone can be a lot happier, and Cartman can get his Nintendo Wii, which is the real message about atheism, I'm pretty sure. But in all seriousness, what I think South Park is really trying to say here is that it doesn't matter if we came from God or a retarded fish frog, because we're all still stupid anyways.
So there you go. You're the retarded offspring of 5 monkeys having butt sex with a fish squirrel. Congratulations.
Now look, guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but South Park barely covers this topic. Like, of all the religions big and small that South Park has made fun of, Islam doesn't really get brought up much. And I don't think it's because they're scared to. They put Muhammad in their show, even though they were getting death threats. But if I had to guess why the topic is so rarely brought up, it's because Trey Parker and Matt Stone don't really know much about it. They're not Muslim, they probably didn't grow up around many Muslim people in their small Colorado towns, so it just wasn't on their radar until it became part of the news. Which would explain why the only times they do cover the religion, it's almost always from a perspective that's relevant to America, like geopolitics with religious extremism, or fighting against censorship with Muhammad.
You see, I learned something today.
So we just not going to talk about how Muhammad was already in the show like 5 seasons earlier, you know, super best friends, one of the best episodes in the show. For some reason, there was never an issue with that. Like, they even gave him the ability to fly and make fire, which is pretty damn sweet if you ask me. Ah, the glory days. But sadly, that was all kissed away after the Jyllands posting controversy in Denmark, which caused Comedy Central to start censoring South Park. But yeah, for the most part, South Park's coverage of Islam has primarily focused on the Middle East and the extremist movements that were born out of political strife, because that was what was relevant to America at the time. There was a lot of fear about terrorism, and it was reflected in the show. They talked about 9/11 or Al-Qaeda, or they do stuff like that episode where the boys are playing ninjas, but everyone thinks it's ISIS.
Hey, excuse me, man, do you know where...
And while this technically isn't from South Park, Trey and Matt's movie Team America also tends to focus on terrorism a good amount. But when it comes to those topics, I honestly think they're criticizing extremism more than they're actually criticizing the religion itself. And yeah, in retrospect, it's kind of weird that most of the South Park episodes about Islam are really just about terrorism. But given the political nature of the show, I understand why that happened. Now, there is one more episode that I think is important, and this one's not about terrorism. It has terrorism in it, but it's unrelated terrorism. Seriously though, this episode is like the exact opposite. It's about Muslims facing racism as a result of terrorism. I'm sure you already know which one I'm talking about, but it's season 11's The Snook.
Where is the detonator?
What detonator are you talking?
I can do this all day.
In this episode, a new kid named Bahir joins South Park Elementary. He's a Muslim American kid whose family just moved into town, and it's his first day at school. Now, for pretty much everyone in South Park, this is absolutely no big deal. It's just a typical day in the life. But obviously for Cartman, it's more like this.
Hoo, 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 no, no.
Throughout this episode, Cartman is working with the CIA to stop a threat against Hillary Clinton, who now has a snook in her sniz. It's a whole thing, we're not gonna get into it. But because Cartman suspects that Bahir's family is behind the attack on Clinton, he immediately targets them and interrogates them by farting in their faces a bunch. Of course, he's just being a racist asshole. Bahir's family was innocent and had nothing to do with the attacks, but because of their treatment, they decide to leave town, thus destroying the newfound friendship that Butters had made with Bahir. God damn it, why do they have to do that to Butters? Now, obviously, this episode is commenting on the uptick in racism towards Muslim people that occurred after 9/11, where many Americans just assumed that everyone from the Middle East was a terrorist or something. And this episode was their way of being like, nah, they're normal. Stop being racist. Now, is this a groundbreaking message? No, not really. But this was also like the only episode I could find that wasn't about terrorists, so yeah, you take what you can get. I mean, I guess there's like that one scene from the Ginger Cow episode where a Muslim dude points out that they're all being peaceful with each other.
We are all in a room together, talking. Has it occurred to anyone else that this prophecy, which amazingly is in all three religions, could actually be meant to bring us together?
But like, we're kind of grasping at straws here. The truth is that South Park doesn't really talk about Islam other than extremism. It's honestly kind of lacking on the subject. And so I don't really have much to say. So why don't we all just move on to something a little more juicy and go to the next section of this video. Psych! Just kidding. We're not covering Scientology. Scientology isn't a real religion. Like, come on. Thetans? Get out of here. Lord Xenu would never. All right. Let's get on to the next real topic, shall we? Oh yeah, now this will be an interesting section to talk about. Definitely won't have a number of concerning comments on this section of the video. You know, it's kind of hard to think about South Park without thinking about Jews, right? I mean, Cartman calling Kyle a stupid Jew is so baked into the DNA of the show that they were doing it before South Park was even officially South Park.
Dreidel, dreidel, dreidel. We had that stupid song. Yeah, Hanukkah sucks. Don't you oppress me, fat boy. Don't call me fat, but then don't belittle my people, you f***ing fat ass.
It's pretty obvious that the show has this unique relationship with Judaism because of Matt Stone. Matt is Jewish, he's the inspiration behind Kyle in the way that Trey Parker is Stan, and he's basically the Jewish voice of South Park, which is why almost all of the show's coverage of Judaism, or the Jewish experience, is usually conveyed through Kyle's perspective. Not exclusively, of course. We do get at least one scene of South Park people gathered at synagogue, and then there's that one episode with Ike's Briss, where we see a rabbi character in his Canadian circumcision tools.
My pleasure, Sheila. I brought the normal cutting device, but then I remembered that Ike was Canadian, so I brought the right one. Where is the little rugrat?
But ultimately, Kyle leads the way when it comes to the Jews in this show. Now with Kyle, his Jewish identity is less of a religious thing and more of an ethnicity thing, so naturally, South Park's commentary on Judaism tends to follow suit. It's more about the people and the culture than the religion. But you shouldn't be surprised by that. You're a smart fella. I'm sure you've noticed that that's basically the trend for this show's approach to religion. Now, in the early years of the show, they focused a lot on what it's like to be a Jew in a predominantly Christian world. What it's like to be the odd man out because of your faith. Which I imagine is how Matt Stone felt growing up in Colorado. Like a lonely Jew on Christmas.
Instead of Silent Night, I'm singing Hu Hachto Gavish. And what the is up with lighting all these candles? Tell me, please.
Here, Kyle is the only Jewish kid in school, and so he ends up feeling very lonely and isolated during the holidays. He doesn't understand why he can't be a part of the festivities along with everyone else, and why Hanukkah is so much more lame than Christmas. Which is totally valid and real, by the way. As someone who celebrates both holidays every year, Christmas is dumb litty, while Hanukkah is mid-AF. And that's just facts. But of course, Kyle doesn't just get excluded from Christmas celebrations in the episode. He also gets singled out because his mom complains when she sees him acting in a school play that has a nativity scene. You know, because it doesn't align with their family's beliefs. Now, as a kid, I was like Kyle. I didn't really care about seeing Jesus stuff in the world around me. And I'd probably feel mega embarrassed if my mom singled me out like that because I never really saw myself as different from the other kids. But as an adult, I can kinda see why Sheila would feel upset over it. I mean, it does go against the version of history that she wants to teach her kids. Like, she's still being an annoying bitch, but I get it. But yeah, that's the sort of Jewish versus Christian culture clash that we saw a lot of in the early years of South Park. It often poked fun at how it made Kyle's family different from the other kids, despite his desire to fit in. And it was a two-way street kind of thing. Like sometimes they'd focus on how Kyle's exposure to Christian culture made him confused. You know, like when his parents are having problems in bed, so he tries to give his dad a resurrection. Or when the kids teach Kyle about hell, and it not only scares the crap out of him, but it leads to him having this conversation with his parents, where he tries to reconcile the concept with his own beliefs as a Jew.
Us Jews don't believe in hell.
We don't? But what if we're wrong?
Well, Kyle, they could be wrong too.
Yeah, but if they're wrong, no big deal. If we're wrong, we burn in hell.
I've always loved that bit because it just makes so much sense from a logical standpoint. Like, yeah, why wouldn't you play it safe if going to hell is potentially on the line? Anyways, while a lot of these examples are of the Christian world seeping into Kyle's Jewish upbringing in some way, it's not the only way that South Park would highlight how being Jewish made him different. Because another thing they like to do is intentionally emphasize the things that make Jewish culture quirky. They'll aggressively lean into stereotypes and create these hyperbolic moments that make the Jewish experience seem kooky and bizarre. Like, for example, take the all-time classic episode Jubilee, where Kyle brings Kenny along with him to Jew Scouts, giving him the opportunity to see how Kyle's world differs from his own.
Nahi Kayam.
Now, I'm pretty sure I don't have to clarify this, but just in case. No, there's no such thing as Jew Scouts, at least not whatever this is. Jews do not dress their kids with the swirly hair twirls and send them off to camp for a night where they make popcorn necklaces for Moses. But the point of this episode is that they're taking a bunch of vague Jewish elements and blending them together into a hilarious abomination in order to satirize the culture. It's designed to be an exaggeration of the religion and its customs, which in turn makes it feel distinct from the rest of the world of South Park, even though a lot of the Jewish stuff that happens in the episode isn't actually accurate at all. Like, for example, not every Jewish person speaks with a Brooklyn accent, and most Jewish camps won't have a Meshuggah Hall or a chutzpah badge. Okay, well, maybe the badge is real, I don't know. But I can pretty much guarantee you that Moses didn't actually look like a giant Zordon dreidel.
Great and honorable Moses, what do you desire from us, your children?
I desire macaroni pictures.
Okay, fine, I admit it. There's no way to prove that Moses didn't look like that. But yeah, this type of exaggerated stereotyping of Jews and Jewish culture is all over the show. It's the foundation of Sheila as a character. She's a whiny Jewish mother. It's the entire purpose of Kyle's cousin Kyle, who is such an extreme stereotype that he may as well be from the Museum of Tolerance. And of course, it's the whole joke with future Cartman, who is not only a rabbi that says things that actual rabbis would say, but he's also so over the top as a caricature that his wife is named Yentl, and he sings weird Hebrew songs to his children.
You little ones are always good. Make hell, Mikloshka pudding. With plots, with laughter, tea.
Stop it!
I know I've showed that clip in a different video before, but it's just such a funny clip. Now, obviously, a lot of this humor is basically borderline racist, and if not that, it's at the very least heavily focused on stereotyping for comedic effect, but it's never done in a derogatory way. Like, yeah, they're making fun of Jewish people, taking the piss, if you will, but they don't rip into the institutions or the followers like they do with Christianity or even atheism. And that's probably because the institutions of Judaism don't really have as much relevance in American culture, although I would like to see them rip into the ADL, but that's censorship, not religion. Now, it's not always fun and games in South Park when it comes to the topic of Jews. They have spoken out against anti-Semitism in the past, and I know the first thing you're thinking of when I say that is Cartman ripping on Kyle.
Oh yeah? Well, you're a stupid Jew. You're a Jew. Shut your goddamn Jew mouth. Good job, Jew. Jew. Shut Jew. You're Jewish. Dude is Jewish. Jew. 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 I told you Jewish people don't have rhythm. Off, Cartman!
But while all that stuff is iconic and hilarious, it's not actually what I'm referring to. Because when I say that South Park will cover the topic of anti-Semitism, I'm talking more about stuff like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, like in the episode Cupid Ye from season 26, where they take a jab at Kanye and the major holes in the rhetoric he pushes. In this episode, the whole school gets indoctrinated by fast-spreading propaganda that leads them to believe that Kyle is controlling Hollywood.
Mario Brothers, Cal? You seriously can't do better than Mario Brothers?
Of course, this isn't actually true. Hollywood is run by powerful people of many ethnicities. Jews are just highly represented because they started the industry, which is explained at the end of the episode.
If one idiot says that a certain group runs Hollywood, look into it. With very minimal effort, you will find that, quote, Hollywood is a multi-tiered industry run by tens of thousands of people from all over the world.
But the way they portray how easily these kinds of ideas spread is very poignant. They have a little Cupid Kanye that shoots arrows of anti-Semitism, causing the ideas to quickly spread and take over the entire school. So even though the show is famous for making Jew jokes, they still take a pretty firm stance when it comes to the seriousness of anti-Semitism and the lack of credibility behind a lot of those ideas. Yeah, that episode is directly for all you noticers out there. That's South Park noticing you, noticing how incredibly stupid you are. Anyways, covering anti-Semitism is about as serious as it gets when it comes to South Park's take on Judaism. Otherwise, it really just sticks to satirizing the culture or the Jewish experience. And that's probably how I would sum up South Park's approach to the topic. They don't really focus on the religion, the institutions, or the followers all that much. They just like to poke fun at the culture by making funny stereotypes like this.
How was your flight?
Oh, it was terrible. They recycled the air on board and it really did a number on my asthma. I asked them to turn up the oxygen and they wouldn't.
So we're finally here. The moment you've all been waiting for. Mormons. You know I had to save the best for last. And I do mean the best, because any real South Park fan knows that Mormons are the one and only true correct religion in the show.
I was a totally strict and devout Protestant. I thought we went to heaven. Yes, well, I'm afraid you were wrong.
Well, who was right? Who gets into heaven?
I'm afraid it was the Mormons. Yes, the Mormons were the correct answer.
I think it goes without saying that Trey Parker and Matt Stone are absolutely fascinated with Mormons. They made Orgasmo, they made the Book of Mormon, and they've covered the Mormon people on South Park multiple times now. And that fascination seems to stem from how happy and joyous they are. In the show, they're always portrayed as being insanely wholesome. Like so wholesome that nobody could ever possibly be that nice. They're friendly, they're charitable, they enjoy doing things like making arts and crafts. They're all super smart and talented. They're like literally the perfect people. Well, I mean on the outside, of course. We all know that in reality, the Church of Latter-day Saints is very cult-like and they do bad things to their people, allegedly. But that's just, you know, real life. In South Park, Mormons are pretty much never depicted in a bad light. They're perfect. They're the chosen people of God, and they're never the butt of the joke. This might be the most unique religion in all of South Park because instead of criticizing the followers or the institutions of the religion, they actually go for the religious texts themselves, which they never usually do, but in this case, I guess they just couldn't resist it because it's just so dumb.
Joseph Smith was called a prophet, dum 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 dum. He started the Mormon religion, dum 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 dum.
Season 7's All About Mormons is absolutely savage in how it rips into the mythos of the religion. Like, they go out of their way to explain how ridiculous the story is. How you need to have zero critical thinking skills to not notice any issues with it. And they do this by showing all of the massive holes in Joseph Smith's claims and how he clearly was not able to back up anything he said. Like, at all. But the best part is that despite the harsh criticism, they choose to focus on the positives of Mormonism, the spiritual benefits of the religion. Like in this episode, it doesn't matter that the stories are ridiculous because those stories lead people to living happy lives. And the way they deliver that message is brilliant. In this episode, a Mormon kid named Gary moves into town, and his super nice, perfect family quickly catches Stan's attention. So much so that he starts learning about the Book of Mormon to better understand why the religion makes their family so great. This even captivates Randy too and causes the whole Marsh family to convert.
The Harrisons are really nice people, and you should see how loving and together their family is. I think there's something to that religion.
That's what they made me think, too.
All right, that does it. From now on, our family is Mormon.
But when Stan learns about how incredibly stupid the story from the Book of Mormon actually is, he immediately rejects the religion and feels betrayed. He believes that Gary's perfect family routine was just an act to trick people into converting, and that it preys on stupid and impressionable people like his dad. So, out of anger, he ends their friendship. And when Gary approaches him one final time at the end of the episode, he doesn't try to win their friendship back. Instead, he delivers a speech that both demonstrates the positives of being a Mormon and absolutely destroys Stan in the process.
Because what the church teaches now is loving your family, being nice, and helping people. And even though people in this town might think that's stupid, I still choose to believe in it. All I ever did was try to be your friend, Stan. But you're so high and mighty you couldn't look past my religion and just be my friend back. You got a lot of growing up to do, buddy. Suck my balls.
Now this moment hits very hard for a few reasons. One of them is the fact that it's the only time in the entire episode that Gary says anything profane, which they save for his very last words. But the reason I want to focus on is that it leaves the viewer with a very simple and profound message, which is that truth and fact are not always the most valuable assets in our lives. I can tell I'm losing you here, just stay with me for a second. Sometimes the most meaningful contributions to the world are built on the foundations of stories that could never happen, or in the case of the Book of Mormon, really dumb lies. But that's okay, because those stories led to good values and life lessons. And if the value we get out of those stories outweighs the importance of their validity, then maybe the most rational thing that we can do is embrace those positive ideas instead of get hung up on their origins. We don't have to pretend that the religious text is real. We just need to understand how it helps us. Now, I think it's very fitting that they chose to communicate that idea through an episode dedicated to Mormons, because honestly, it's a reflection of their take on religion in general, which is why they usually criticize the institutions and the followers, but not the religious texts. But here they're saying, yeah, you can make fun of the texts too, but they're doing it to make a point. They're saying not to take the stories literally, but to take the lessons to heart. In fact, that's actually the exact conclusion at the end of Red Hot Catholic Love.
You see, these are just stories. Stories that are meant to help guide people in the right direction. Love your neighbor. Be a good person. That's it.
So I think it's perfect that the Mormon episode is the episode that's dedicated to that message. Because in the world of South Park, Mormons are the chosen ones. They're the ones who make it into heaven. So I don't know if that was planned, but I just think it's neat that it ended up being the episode that best reflects their views on religion as a whole. Although, let's be honest, if heaven is like spending time at Gary's house, do any of us really want to be there?
Hello and welcome. We're glad you made it, brother.
Ah, who the hell are you?
We're just about to do a play about how much stealing hurts you deep inside. Come join us.
Let's
Come on.
go.
You're here forever.
So, now that we've done all that examining of religion in South Park, it's time for our final takeaways. Now I was gonna use this conclusion to briefly talk about God in South Park, because I haven't really mentioned him yet, and we do get a few appearances from him, plus he looks like this.
That's God? Yea, 'tis my Father, the Creator. He is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Well, yeah, but that?
What did you expect me to look like, my son?
Well, not like that.
And you know, I was gonna do this whole spiel about how everyone in the world of South Park acts like an irrational idiot, except for God, who's always mature, level-headed, and rational. So I was gonna argue that it means that in the world of South Park, the most divine thing of all is rationality, and how that's the core philosophy of the show. But then I was like, that conclusion doesn't really connect with this video at all, so I just scrapped it, while also talking about scrapping it so that I could do both. But back on topic, South Park versus religion. What did we actually learn? Well, first of all, nothing is sacred. It doesn't matter how holy or important we like to believe religion to be, this show will make fun of almost everything that has to do with it, regardless of who it offends. Jesus is the self-sacrificing savior of mankind? Yeah, well, he kills people with guns and kinda sucks at performing miracles. Moses communicated with God and gave us the 10 Commandments? Well, did you know that he's also a giant holographic dreidel that desires macaroni pictures? The point is that no matter what religion we're talking about, it's simply never sacred to South Park. But spirituality, on the other hand, now that's a little bit different, because whether it's the Mormons, the Catholics, or whatever belief system really, the lessons and values that we get from those religions are always seen as good and worth praising in the eyes of the show. That moral guidance is what stands the test of time, and it's the only thing that South Park won't knock down with its satire and its criticisms, which says a lot about the maturity of the show. They can get as silly and ridiculous as they want, but they always have that underlying integrity, which is where the wisdom of the show flourishes. So whether you believe in God or not, whether you follow a religion or don't, there's only two things you need to remember. Focus on the message over the details, and Scientology is totally not a real religion.